Ladies and gentlemen, what's up? Here we go, section 4 of chapter 2. In this video, you're going to see 4 different theorems. That's right, 4 different theorems that's going to tell you and show you how in the world you use congruent supplements and congruent complements to solve any particular problem. And I will tell you, these 4 theorems you need to commit to memory. You need to memorize, you need to memorize, you need to memorize, because yes, the concept for sure you need to know, but memorizing them will help you understand the concept. You're going to use these a ton in 2 column proofs, but the memorization of these are really going to help you make the connections, because now we're starting to get a little bit deeper into these proofs, guys. So make sure you take these things to heart and write them down and study them. Study this video. And I'm going to give you some examples to keep it a little lighthearted. I'm going to give you some examples to prove how these 4 things actually work through some simple little silly examples. So here we go. Let's say I have a person, oh, look at him, and he says, hey, I am 70 years old. I am 70 years old. However, all of a sudden, this is why his eyes boggle like that, and he's like, what? Here comes another old man flying in from the left. He'd probably go a little slower than that, but besides the point. Let's say this little man, oh, the poor guy has no teeth. Oh, let's say he says, and he says, I am 110. I am 110. Well, listen, as silly as that sounds, follow the example. Let's say that this thing is 110 and this thing is 70. I don't mean thing in terms of like being mean to the person. Let's say it's 70. You could certainly consider these 2 ages to be supplementary. Now, let's say over here to the right, oh, here comes another person. Let's say they say the same thing. Wait a minute there, Sonny. I'm 110 too. And he says, and certainly you could see this, these 2 guys right here, you could consider their ages to be supplementary. Now, here's the scoop. I have 2 different things. They look like twins, but whatever. I have 2 different things, if they're angles, whatever, that are supplementary to the same exact angle. So what do you think I could conclude about these 2 guys right here? You see it right on your screen. They are congruent. Now, what you need to write in your notes is this. Here's theorem 4. I said it through that example. Go back and listen to it. If 2 angles are supplementary to the same exact angle, then they, meaning the 2 angles or the 2 older guys, then they are congruent to each other. So it looks exactly like this. Again, if 2 things are supplementary to the same thing, they're supplementary, and these guys are supplementary. That makes these 2 things congruent. That's theorem 4. Let's roll on to the next example. Let's say I got this little guy marching saying, hi, hello, and this little guy going, hello, hi, hello there, and they say, guess what? We're 30 years old. Not sure they'd sound like that, but it doesn't really matter. So let's say these 2 things are 30, and yes, guess what? You could consider those 2 ages to be congruent. Absolutely. So let's say they were born at the same exact time, same exact day, same exact like second. Doesn't happen, I know, but they are congruent to each other in age. Now, let's say we have a cool dude down here, looks like me, that's right, smiling like, yeah. And he says, wait a minute, I'm a cool 150. I know it's not possible, but understand the analogy. So you could say that these 2 guys right here are supplementary in age. And let's say I have another guy over here to the right that says, wait a minute, I'm also 150. So here's what you got. You got something here that's supplementary. You got something here that's supplementary. These 2 things are congruent. So the question is, if these 2 guys are supplementary to 2 congruent things, what can we conclude about these 2 guys? Of course, they're congruent. I just gave you the wording of the next theorem. Theorem number 5 says this. If I have 2 angles that are supplementary to 2 congruent angles, then they are congruent. There you go. Nothing more than that. Go back and listen to it again. Go back and watch the example. So far, we've done 2 supplementary things to 1. If we have 2 supplementary to 1, these 2 things are congruent. Then this one says if I have 2 things that are supplementary to 2 congruent things, then that makes these things down here congruent to each other. Happens that way all the time. So again, here's the example. If I have these 2 guys supplementary, these 2 guys supplementary at the same time to 2 congruent things, then that makes these guys congruent. Awesome. I wonder if this applies to complementary. Well, let's see. Let's say you got this goofy looking hyena dog whatever thing, standing there being very confused, saying, I don't know which way to go. I'm so confused. And and he says, wait, I think I'm 50. I'm not sure. I think I'm 50. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm sure this would happen. Out of nowhere, here comes an elephant. He's like, ah! And he says, I'm going to be 40. Doesn't really matter. He just flies across the screen and says, I'm 40. And then, look, 50 and 40. You could consider those ages to be complementary. Well, let's say I have another elephant over here running the same opposite directions. They might run into each other. That would be very bad. But he says, I'm also 40. You can say that these two ages are complementary. So, if I have two different things, well, they're not really that different, that are complementary to the same exact thing, then what can we conclude about those two things? Yes, they are congruent. And that is theorem number 6. So write this down in your notes. If two angles are complementary to the same angle, then they are congruent. So two angles, two different things, complementary to the same exact angle, then they are congruent. So here it is again. These two guys are complementary to that hyena thing. Therefore, they, the elephants, are congruent. And the last one, the last theorem. Let's say we have this goofy little turtle here talking on his cell phone. Doesn't make any sense. I know, it doesn't happen. He needs muscles. Come on, turtle, let's go. And then you got this other turtle over there talking back and forth and said, hey, you're pretty cool. Yeah, you're pretty cool too. We should go work out. Yeah, because I don't have any muscles. Whatever. And then they say, wait, dude, I think we're 50. So, like the movie, dude, Jellyman, offspring, Jellyman. Anyways, so let's say that they're 80 years old. In the movie, they're 150. Doesn't matter if you know what movie I'm talking about. Regardless, here we go. So these guys are 80 years old, and here's the scoop. This little paraded zebra thing comes flying in and says, I am only 10 years old. Yeah, zebras don't live that long. Just kidding. I have no idea. But you could certainly consider these guys right here, this turtle on the left and this zebra here, could be considered to be, of course, complementary. And let's say we have another zebra over here where he's 10 as well. And he's going to say, wait a minute, I'm going to be complementary to these two guys right there. So 80 and 10 are complementary. Well, here's what's cool. If I take these two things, and I ask you the question, these two complementary angles, if these two guys right here, the zebra and zebra, these two things, could they be congruent? You bet they are. So here's your actual wording. Theorem 7 says, if two angles are complementary to two congruent angles, then they are congruent. If two angles are complementary to two congruent angles, then they are congruent. And here's what it is. If two angles, these two zebras, are complementary to these two turtles, then these two little guys, these guys up here are congruent, then these two guys are congruent as well. So there you go. So there's your 4 theorems. We can use those in 2-column proofs. Absolutely study those, memorize those, write them down many times so you know them. And we're going to use these in a bunch of 2-column proofs. In fact, you know what I'll do? I might do another example after this video so you can see an example in proofs how it actually works. But I would encourage you to look at your sample problems. They're very, very important. Look at those and see how they worded stuff, and we're going to master these in class. Later.